Today, let's talk about school branding with Madison Carr of Creative Chameleon Studiios.
The Christian Principles Podcast is brought to you in partnership with the Herzog Foundation. But bear in mind, the views and opinions expressed here are those of the hosts and not necessarily of the Herzog Foundation. Please be sure to hit that follow button on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Also, on Spotify, be sure to tap the star icon near the top and select the number of stars you'd like to give us. We'd be so grateful for 5. On Apple Podcasts, scroll down to the ratings and review section and then tap write a review to share your thoughts of the podcast. Thank you.
Welcome to the Christian Principles Podcast. I'm Mark Zonkel. Today, I'm flying solo somewhat in so much that Matt isn't able to be with us today, but I am being interviewed and am interviewing Madison Carr with Creative Chameleon Studiioi. Now, Madison's company has a podcast that they use to bring further focus on the Christian schools which her studio works with, and I was able to interview her after she got done interviewing me. So you're going to hear from both sides of that recording. Make sure you go check out the Creative Chameleon Studiioi as she supports us, so we would support her in her efforts to help Christian schools grow stronger and flourish for him.
An effective school brand is one that presents your school in a correct, competitive, and compelling way. To do it well, everyone has to be unified in their vision and their efforts to shape an effective brand. At the head of the ship is the principal of your school. So today we're going to get a principal's perspective. I'm very honored to be joined by Mark, who is the host of Christian Principles Podcast. He regularly discusses the unique challenges and opportunities faced by Christian school leaders, and he's going to bring in his expertise to help deliver informative conversation. Mark, thanks for coming to the show.
Well, thank you for that wonderful lead-in. I don't know where that Mark guy is, but hope he shows
I'm
up.
honored to have someone here who has tons of experience to share. You have definitely a vast range of topics there, and your podcast is built on the concept of taking an idea that you face, that you've been thinking about, and exploring together in this conversation for the benefit of your listeners. And I'm really curious, as a creative, I think a lot about ideas and ideation. So what are, in your experience so far, what are some hallmarks of an idea that would capture an attention of your audience and be worthy of a podcast? Do you have like a filter for whether or not you're going to dedicate an episode to a topic?
So the filter we have so far, what we're going to dedicate, the content of a topic to, has been, first of all, what do our listeners want? So if our listener has a topic in mind and tells us about it, we bump that to the front because we want to honor that interaction. Much like a student who comes to us and says, I really need help with something, we are going to pause, if we can, everything else we're doing and really bump that up. Now, interestingly enough, we've had somebody who came to us recently with like a string of ideas, and we were already in these pre-dated episodes that we just needed to get out. But that listener is going to have his 4 things bumped to the front very quickly. So number 1, what do they want to hear from us? Really, the rest of it has been what frustrates us, or what frustrated us at a certain time, or what do we look at that we just don't think anybody else is talking about, but we know is a big deal. People are talking about where to find teachers. That's a problem for taxpayer-funded education, or private education, or Christian education, or church school education. That's a problem for everybody right now. So people need to know how to get more money to pay their teachers. Okay, we're going to talk about that a little bit, but I'm also going to talk about where staplers go. I'm also going to talk about the frustrations that we have with Lost and Found, because we're all frustrated at why people don't want to keep a hold of their personalized items that they pay to have the branding on at our schools. And that's a big deal. And it's something that we think others will want to hear. So those are the 2 larger funnels that we would have for how we're going to dedicate content. And content seemingly just never ends for us in that way. So I suppose sometime we will talk through the entire encyclopedia, but until we get to that point.
That's fantastic. It is a very unique position to be in. The role of principal in of itself is already unique. So I had talked to a lot of people and work with a lot of people who are in admissions and marketing and advancement. That's that's my realm right there. But you have an experience as, top of the school, leading a school. For someone who has not held that role, maybe someone, lower in the school, elsewhere in the school team, what would be some important things about the position of principal that you would wish for them to understand that would make your life easier if they knew
Wow.
what it was like to be in your seat?
Well, if they wanted to make my life easier, of course, they could just send a check to P.O. Box 999. Of course not. Excluding spiritual alignment, I'm going to assume that at the Christian school there's a critical alignment between all the stakeholders, and that is the blood of Christ. That is standing on biblical principles. That is knowing that we are a community founded not on the need for students to go to college, not on a desire for our kindergartners to read, not on a desire for 8th graders to be in Algebra 1, but on Christ. So starting there and assuming that's the case, anything that they can do to further their understanding of that with their head of school would be such an encouragement to their head of school if the head of school doesn't have that understanding with whoever the stakeholder is. But if that's already been provided, the other things which a stakeholder could do to further that relationship or to further support, better understand, enter into conversations which are useful, would be knowing that this person, and there's assumption you have to make this based on a relationship. So again, assuming a relationship, but this person is sitting here in some regards getting fire from above with the board, getting fire from kind of to the side with their admin team and their office team, to the other side with the faculty, and from below, because we're dealing with God's greatest treasures, which I'm not saying parents are below, but if we just, however you're going to order the organizational structure there, from wherever the parents are on your little chart, they're getting fire from there too. Oh, and don't forget, they're getting fire from the students as well. And we think of a teacher, and a teacher is going, their issues comes with the day-by-day dealing with the heads in their school and the parents attached to those heads. But hopefully, I, as an administrator, I am feeding them encouragement and resource and blessing and confirmation and affirmation and celebration. The administrative team is probably putting out fires on all sides, and not always to the same level of affirmation and encouragement that your McDonald's employee gets. Not always to the same level of affirmation and encouragement that some dad who works from home and he doesn't see even the consumer he's working with face to face. He doesn't have to. And then he comes into the school and wants a pound of flesh or whatnot. Realizing and starting all the conversations that would occur, and needful conversations. It is God's blessing, that we're God's children, the treasures He's given us, the ones we're working with. And hey, if it's a Christian school, then it's probably tuition funded, which means it's your pocketbook too. So it's your pocketbook and it's your kids. I get it. We totally understand that. Still starting that conversation with a measure of, I need to try to think critically about why I'm coming in. My father-in-law, a longtime educator, said parents lose all common sense when it comes to their own children. We know that. I have 4 right now that are 5 years old and younger. I can completely see me at some point in the future looking at my little Camden and saying to my little Camden, "You didn't do anything wrong, honey." But then I put on my administrator hat and no, she obviously did, you idiot. Of course she did. She's the only one in the bathroom at that time. She was the one who did it. As much as a parent could come into the conversation with, we are in critical alignment because of Christ. We are trying to grow our children in the image of Christ. I'm willing to hear you out. And I'm assuming, because I'm paying for it and other things, that you're going to hear me out too. I can count on one hand how many times that conversation started that way with parents. And I would tell you that conversation would make me want to bend over backwards as a principal to do handstands or whatever else I could do to let them know, hey, you have now entered this conversation in a way that I want to celebrate because no one else enters these conversations that way. And that's a blessing. But that just comes down to being Christ-like and putting ourselves last. And that's not the simplest thing for most, for my audience and who I'm looking at is mostly America. That's not a simple thing for Americans to do, is to be selfless, is to be the meek, to follow the Beatitudes and be the meek one. Even when it comes to our kids, more so our society is telling us, be mama bear, come in with your claws out. Well, there's nothing godly about that at all. And there's nothing godly about telling your kid that you better be the one that finishes the fight. No, that's not what the scriptures say at all. And so being in alignment on that front, that would be it'd be way more meaningful than the donuts. And I love a good Boston cream donut, but being in that kind of critical alignment would be way more meaningful than the donuts. So
that's very insightful. And I think I was just thinking and talking about this with someone. I think for Christian schools, there's a particularly unique balancing act that they have to walk, where part of their selling point, part of their proposition is transparency and accountability. But then on the other side of it, the head of school has to run a school. And anyone who's been in charge of any team to any capacity knows the sheer number of data you're working with, that you are privy to a lot of conversations other people on the outside are not, that there's a lot of things to weigh. When I take schools through the branding process and we do workshops, we collect the decision makers together and we have a very real conversation about, do you want to be viable? That means you need to get students. If you want to get students, that means you need to sell to them. How do you sell to them? And it's a very business conversation that a teacher might not enjoy listening to, because we really are stepping back from the pure, we have a Harvard education conversation and we're saying, how do we sell? How do we get the right students, which means that there's wrong students for our school? And that's a very tricky conversation to have. And I think a head of school kind of carries that balancing act completely on their shoulders. And then particularly for a Christian school, interacting with parents and families, trying to maintain that proposition of, we are transparent, we view you as partners in this journey, but also you are running a school. And I think, I'd imagine every principal has had to deal with that burden and figure out how to handle that. And I think the more you climb that ladder, by the time you get to the head of school position, I think that is even harder to naturally be surrounded with people who are willing to call you out on things. There's this whole power dynamic. You mentioned, working with boards, and that's something that I think people elsewhere in the administrative team, they know there's a board there. They know that the board is seated at the table, but they're not quite aware of the true nature of having to work with the board when it comes to decision making. So when I do branding workshops and branding projects with schools, for some schools, the board is very much a big presence, which can be challenging to deal with sometimes. So from that head of school seat, what is it like working with the board? Like, in your view, what are they there to contribute? What are the parameters of their positions? What are things that you're thinking of when you're weighing decisions, knowing you need to go to the board? How do you view that? How could it help someone who doesn't interact with them understand your position?
I have worked with boards that were rubber stamp committees. I have worked with boards that found their way into the minutia of the school day. You need to go to the bylaws of the organization, to the constitution of the church, if it happens to be that, the bylaws that were accepted by the state or whoever it was that accepted your bylaws to make the organization what it is. And they need to be read, and they need to be affirmed and reread, and I would say reaffirmed annually at least, by every member on that board and every other person who would be dealing with that board in that role. Because those questions that you just asked, if they're not informed by that baseline foundational documentation, there will be conflict. Period. There will be conflict. If the bylaws and the job descriptions or the role descriptions of the voluntary board are not written down appropriately, then there will be questions which come up concerning who has the right to hire and fire, who has the oversight of the purse, who has the ability to walk into the school and declare a day off, who has any of these, if it is not written down and then adhered to and routinely revisited. So that could be, and I received this advice from Dr. Roger Erdvig. He's with Summit Ministries now, well-respected, does board leader training and whatnot. He said there were times when he would bring in the Constitution in a binder with him to the board meeting that included the bylaws and the updated things that were voted on. He would bring it in, and there were times when, and I always felt like he could do this in a way that I couldn't because I was younger. So I was giving myself that kind of out, which was inappropriate because if I'm in the role, I'm in the role and they should respect it. But he would stop the meeting, point them back to line and verse, and say, according to this, rule X, subsection Y, that question should not be a question because it's been answered. So unless we're going to redo the bylaws, this is not a question for us to be looking at right now. So when I hear your question and I think about the ways in which these interact, first of all, those relationships have to be well documented as to, you don't want to say, hey, we shy away from wording in the modern day, like where the power lies, but where the power lies and who's responsible for what. Because much like the biblical marriage situation, and we have a submissive wife and a head of the home, which is the husband. Okay, we're not talking about abuse there. We're talking about very specific roles that if they are not fulfilled, then God's clear picture for the beauty of the home is going to be skewed. And so much in the same way, if these institutions are not following what they scripted in the beginning as best practices and only changing that with very careful and very prayerful review, well, then, first of all, why have them? Second of all, someone's going to be frustrated because someone needs to run the day-to-day operation of the school and be supported in that, not be questioned every other step. Because they're going to get questions every other step from the people that are, again, I go back to the under language, the parents, the students, the faculty, the staff. Those questions will come. If those questions come top down and bottom up, that administrator won't be there very long.
Yeah,
they can't be. It's not going to happen. They're going to that body will burn through administrators because no one's meant to handle that. However, if what is entered into by the administrators clearly understood, clearly provided a job description, and then all are on board for that job description, well, then the administrative member cannot say, "Oh, I was looking to make this higher, but wait, why are you hiring somebody else?" Well, it's because that's not a part of your job description to hire and fire. You're the manager. We give you people to work with, and you put them where you think they're best. At the same time, if that board then comes back and says you didn't put this person in the right place, they don't get to say that because they gave them the people to work with, and the administrator who's there day by day put them in a place that she thought was best. So when I hear that question, I think back to, if we follow what has been written, and what has been written is worth its weight, is actually worthwhile. We're stemming off a lot of the quote unquote issues that would come simply by following what's been written. And from there, when we can point back to, we're not upset at a person, we're either upset at a policy or we disagree with this policy, it makes the conversations, which are going to be heated conversations, and the disagreements that happen in the room. And I say heated; they don't have to be heated. They can just be disagreement. Disagreement doesn't have to be heated. It can be it can just be disagreement. That's fine. It will make those conversations of the disagreement pointed at policy, pointed at a black and white text, not at somebody's face, not at somebody's nose.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I think the idea of standards and structure is so important. When I do strategy with schools, like the very first thing we do is figure out like the core pillars, right? Like, your position, your promise, your values, like these foundational pillars. And then the dream student, the dream family is key, because then everything else we do when it comes to creative, which is very open, to opinions and feelings and all those kind of conversations. But we are then able to look at creative through the lens of, does it fit our ethos? Does it appeal to our family? It makes those conversations, they do get heated sometimes, but overall it makes them so much easier and more productive because we have this agreed upon parameter, these agreed upon rules and standards. So I think that's helpful to know that should be happening at the highest level as well for your board and for your head.
Pause. No, I don't mean pause the episode. I mean, let's take a pause from the episode so I can talk to you about the Herzog Foundation. Mark and I are honored to partner with this amazing organization. Like the Christian Principles podcast, Herzog wants to see your school grow and be successful. To help you achieve those next steps, you will definitely want to check out the Herzog Foundation Institute. Whether you are looking for some quick online training or have the desire to grow with fellow educators at a conference, HFI has you covered. What's even better is that as long as you can get yourself to the many conferences offered throughout the year, Herzog will cover all the costs while you're there, including food and hotels. You really can't beat that. Head over to herzogfoundation.com and get yourself and your team signed up for some training today. What are you waiting for? Just one more thing before we get back to the episode. If Herzog has been a blessing to you and your school, would you mind sending us a message telling us how? We'd love to share that with others.
Madison, could you name for me your creative studio one more time?
Yes. My studio is Creative Chameleon Studioi.
Where'd you come up with Chameleon? I gotta ask.
Yeah, I get asked it a lot, and unfortunately, I don't have a cool backstory for it, and it's not even a name that I am overly passionate about. But when I started freelancing, I was doing kind of everything that came my way. I would work for anyone who would pay me, as one does when they're freelancing, and felt very much like a chameleon. I was not a designer who had like my own distinctive style. I would just adapt to whatever project was before me. So I came up with the alliteration of Creative Chameleon, got the domain name, and 9 years later, I cannot part with that domain name. So I've kept the name.
That's awesome. Now, if you went freelance, that means you were with somebody to start with. So, what industry were you? What industry did you get your start in?
Well, actually, I really kind of went freelance from the start. So
right
I
away.
went to, yeah, I kind of just dove into the deep end. I was homeschooled, so it's ironic that I work with schools now. But I was homeschooled. I went to community college for 2 years. While I was there, I took a design class. Thought maybe this is a profitable career to explore with my creative talents. Loved it right away, and thought I need to start getting a real world experience. Hopped on Craigslist because it was somewhat relevant back in the day, and got my first few projects and freelanced from the very start as soon as I learned how to use Adobe Illustrator. And then for about 2 years, I did some classes, did some internships and stuff. And then from there, just I was blessed to be able to do it full time. So
Wow.
I took the deep dive from the start, and by God's blessing, it's worked out for the last 9 years.
Now, part of that has obviously been working with Christian school, at least in some realm. And maybe you got one and you wanted to get more because it was fun to work with them, which is crazy because we're not the best people to work with sometimes. But tell me about how you found, as you described it earlier, the niche of the niche. Like, how did you come to think, you know what, it would be good to work with these crazies to some extent?
Yeah, so again, I was homeschooled. I had truly no concept for the independent private school world or the public school world. But I was, for 5 years, I put in my time freelancing for all kinds of companies. My main focus was branding. I love doing branding, but I would do it for anyone that would pay me. And then I truly stumbled upon a school client. It was a newly acquired school. They needed branding help. I got connected with them. They said yes. I worked with them, and it was a great project. And it opened my eyes because I was doing branding for them. I had to dive into that world and say, who are your competitors? What are you working against? All these kind of things. I got a quick crash course on the world of private schools and was intrigued, first of all, and then realized there's this whole market that is thriving and is going to boom, because this was about 3 years ago. So it was fresh in the wake of the pandemic. School choice was top of mind. So in doing that one project, I said, I think there's something here that I could work with. I've for years heard the advice of niching down. I ignored it for years. I thought I probably shouldn't ignore it anymore. So
There's riches in the niches for everybody but me.
Yeah, that's kind of, I had that mindset for a while and thought, I don't even know what I'd niche down to. Like, how do you even pick that? But this just came across my plate, and it worked really well. And it was a great client to work with. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the outcome of the project. And I had another school lined up then. And after about 3 schools, I kind of said, okay, I think I have enough that proof of concept, right? It's worth it's worth targeting this industry. I was starting to make connections. I started to understand how the industry worked. And then I pivoted my business to solely focus on schools. So I changed my website, my messaging to just say I work with schools now, and have been riding that ever since.
Wow.
And then I've so far only, my main target was independent schools. It was a very broad target, to be fair. And then as I started working with schools, I do brand strategy. So that's really diving into the ethos, into the ideology of a school. And I love all my clients so far. They've been fantastic clients. But I realized when I worked with a Christian school, it was so seamless to talk with them about their ethos because I shared that ethos. I shared the worldview. I shared the beliefs. And I had not worked with a school yet that I disagreed with fundamentally, but I was definitely aware that with a lot of schools I was working with, some of their ideology was not aligned with mine. And I hadn't had that moral quandary yet, but I could kind of see it coming down the pipeline and thought, if I'm going to use my talents to help further a school, and if I do my job well, that will be the result. I want to do that with schools that I support and I agree with and that I want to see thrive. I think private education is fundamentally important. I believe completely in the right for parents to choose the school they send their kids to. I think independent schools, by and large, are fantastic, but I really want to see Christian schools thrive. So that kind of has become the more focused niche within the niche, because it is a beautiful thing when I can use my talents, my God-given talents, to help an organization further the gospel, further the impact for students and for their lives and their education. So that kind of became a narrowing in of my focus.
Awesome. Amen. Praise the Lord. That's great. That's exciting. Man, that's great. So if you're going to sit down with my school, you got Zockel Christian Academy on the line. We swallowed whatever hook it was and you're reeling us in. Are you the cheapest? Are you the Lexus? Are you the midline? Are you going to be providing me a walk away with a branding guide? Am I going to have quotes on everything from banners, igloos, the cups, like
the Stanleys,
the Stanleys. Am I going to get options on all that branding? Are you going to charge me to be holistic from the front, where you run surveys on all of my population, or I'm supposed to do that before we even have a conversation? Like, in some, I guess, smaller way that I've just talked about. What's your process? Who are you?
Yep. That is a great question. Creatives talk a lot about the process, so we're always eager to talk about it. So my approach is I am an expert consultant, which means that I'm able to come into your school because when you hire me, you're hiring me. You're not hiring this behind the scenes team. So I'm able to come in and say, what's the problem? I'm very much analytic in that way. I say, what is the problem? And then how can we fix it for you? Like, what do we need to do to make it right? So my two-headed approach when it comes to branding, which is a very broad term, but when it comes to branding, all that really is the perception people have of your school, right? So, and it's controlled, if you want to control it, and you should want to control it, it's controlled in two ways. It's controlled in strategic ways through messaging, through how you talk about your school, and then it's controlled visually. How do you look, right? So when you meet someone, how do you gain a perception of them? By how they look and what they say, right? So it's very much the same for schools. So when a school says, we're not really sure who we are, we don't really know how we want to be perceived, we don't know if we're being perceived the right way, or we want to change our perception, all of that falls under the umbrella term of branding. And that's what I do. So I'd come into a school and say, what's the problem? What do you want to fix? And then how can we fix it? And for most schools, it's done through the general process of like a rebrand or a brand refresh is kind of the common term for it. But it's a two-headed approach of we deal with your strategy. So we sort things out behind the scenes. So I do that with schools when they have a change of leadership, when their messaging isn't working, when they don't have clarity on who their dream family is, when they are losing out to competitors. All these kind of things point to a strategy problem. So I do workshops, I get their leaders all in the same room. I facilitate that, and I say, we're going to figure out what your brand strategy is. We do all that kind of thinking at work, and then we say, okay, how do you appear now? How do we figure out your visual identity? So for a lot of schools, the catalyst for all this is their logo is really bad, and they can recognize that. And then it kind of, that allows you to open the hood and say, okay, what's really wrong here?
Sure.
So once we have the strategy figured out, we then say, let's get you looking the right way. And that's done through a identity redesign. So
Sure.
logo redesign, colors, and all of it, all of that stuff is compiled into one big hefty brand book that says, here's all the agreed upon thinking and rules for how to present yourself, so we shape the right perception.
Gotcha.
So that is like the big overall process. It is completely tailored to what the school needs. So that is only discovered through talking with the school.
So when I hear completely tailored, as an administrator who's worked with contractors, I get these pingers of like, this is going to be a per hour charge. Like, this isn't going to be the cheapest thing I've ever done. Well, how do you approach your pricing with these schools?
Yeah, so it is, I will say it is not cheap in the sense that I wouldn't recommend going the cheap route, because the branding is foundational to your marketing, to your admissions, to your PR, to all these things. So if your branding is off, you can burn thousands and thousands of dollars and have nothing to show for it in the end. So it's not cheap in the sense that it's worthwhile doing. And I firmly believe that. And I also firmly believe that not everyone can do what I do. So when I work with a school, I want to make sure that I'm positioned to deliver the best possible result for them. So that being said, it is not hour by hour, because I don't like working that way. We talk about what do you need, and then I deliver a quote. For a typical rebrand, it's like a $10,000 to $20,000 package in the end. Again, tailored to what the school needs. Some schools say we want the brand book, and then we're going to run with, applying it to our school. Some schools say we need help in all of it, like make us our marketing materials after this. So it's tailored in that sense too. But yeah, we talk and figure out what works for you, for your budget, for timing of things is a big part of it. And then really my main goal is giving you something that will be productive and efficient and effective. So it's a beautiful conversation to figure that out. And then once the quote and the timeline sorted out, then it's green light all the way.
I love what you said. We see I've even seen like plumbers out with like, what was it? What's the quote? I'm gonna get it wrong here, but quality isn't expensive, it's priceless, or something along those lines. Because yes, we can go to Fiverr, and I can ask somebody from Djibouti or wherever else to write me up to create me 5 different logo ideas, and then I can go out and push it out. But if it's only, again, going back to the conversation about how smart I am, if it's something that I prefer, perhaps it's not what everybody else prefers, and so on and so forth. And that's only one tiny little part, and usually that's the part that we start with as the gateway, as the problem.
Yep.
So give me one story, but give me the craziest story you got without making one of your clients feel horrible. Off the cuff, do you have anything stood out to you as you walked into like, oh, this is a real mess, or this one I really gotta take care of, like this, we have to start here before we can even talk about starting here?
Yeah, thankfully I don't have any crazy messes that were unexpected messes. There's definitely some messes that I step into, but so far I've been able to kind of have a good scope on them. But something that I see a lot is that experience of a school saying, hey, our enrollment is down, or, we're losing out to our competitors. We don't know who our competitors are sometimes. And, things are floundering, and they'll come to me and say, I think we need like a new brochure design. And as if that will kind of, it's a band-aid to the bullet hole.
That's it. That will fix everything.
That'll fix it. Or a new website. We want our websites to look fancier. And anyone who works with websites will tell you it's not about how it looks, it's about how it functions, it's about content, all these other things. So that's usually like a common, journey to get to me is them saying, we have these pain points, but then they kind of misdiagnose the problem. So once I start talking with them, before we even start beginning work, we're able to kind of tease it out and say, well, it's not really your marketing material that's a problem, it's your messaging. It's, you're losing out to competitors because your competitors look trustworthy and you don't. And it's all those kind of bigger picture things that come to light. So that conversation, that discovery conversation, is super important, because I don't want them throwing money at something that's not going to work. I want to correctly identify the problem so we can fix the problem. So that generally is the mess that I step into is misguided efforts.
Sure.
They have the gusto to deal with something, but they
Mhm.
just have their sights on the wrong thing to deal with. So that's where a lot of my conversations start with schools, is saying what's really going on and what will actually fix this problem.
Mm. All right. Well, I really appreciate your time and talking to me today as much as I came on to your show, and I feel like you've come on to my show now, and it's been great to get to know
Fantastic.
you. Are you mainly southeast, northwest, northeast, southwest? Like where are
Yeah.
you at? You're
So
definitely
I'm
not in the middle of the country, are you? Because those are just ungodly people out there. But
well, I'm Midwest, I think, in by definition. I'm in Cleveland.
oh, okay.
I am a Browns fan, dare I say.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I kept that to the very end of our
Yeah,
conversation.
that was the smart move. I mean, I only have so many ties to so many in
Ravens.
my life.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was
So,
just listening to a crossover podcast yesterday, because of course tonight's draft night. We're going to date this episode
yep.
hardcore, but tonight's draft night, and we were talking about what if the Browns traded their second pick because they're not going to get Cam Ward. So who are they actually going to get? You really want Shador Sanders? Like what's the anyway?
I hope.
It's gonna be great.
Yeah. That could be a whole other podcast. Is our commiserating about being Midwest football fans. But yeah, so I am in Cleveland area. I work with schools almost exclusively remotely. I've been working remote since before it became
Yeah.
a thing.
Before it was cool. Yeah.
Yeah, so I work with schools all over the states, internationally, but my home base is Cleveland, Ohio.
All right. Well, we won't hold it against you, but we're thankful you do work remote so we can actually talk to you.
Yep.
Because otherwise it'd be tough.
The Christian Administrator Spotlight for today's episode goes out to Robbie May. Robbie May is the head of school at Calvary Baptist School in Lansdale, Pennsylvania. Robbie and I have become tight recently, or tighter than we were anyway, coming to find out that we had actually spent some time overlapping at institution in our undergraduate years, as well as now coming into a more formal relationship with some things going on there at Calvary Baptist School. It's been great to get to know Robbie. And Robbie, this prayer is going to go out in recognition of the effect you are having there at Calvary Baptist of Lansdale, along with Principal Leslie Nichols, someone we've had on the show a couple of times and someone we're very thankful to know. So let's go ahead and take a moment and pray for you, Robbie. Father in heaven, I thank you so much for bringing Robbie to Calvary Baptist School in Lansdale. I ask that his efforts there would be reflective of your strength that you have provided for him. I pray for his family. Protect them. Keep the devil away from his family. Might he be able to focus on the work? Might he be strengthened in that work? Might the grace that you provide all of us, the strength you provide all of us, be exactly what he needs to lean on you and to evidence your glory there at CBS. Father, you are good to us and we love you. Amen. Thanks, Robbie. And everybody else, thanks for joining us on today's solo episode of the Christian Principles Podcast. Thanks for growing with us today.